distinguished guests, past and serving members of the Malaysian and Australian Defence Forces, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Malaysian government, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the people and governing bodies of Sabah for your warm welcome of those who visit Sandakan for this service. I welcome all those Malaysian, Australian, and British holders of public service. Your presence adds significance to this solemn event, and I would like to make special mention of the Honourable Madam Vivian Wong She, Member of Parliament of P186 Sandakan, representing the Right Honourable Chief Minister of Sabah, Her Excellency Ms. Danielle Heineke, the Australian High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. A.J. Sharma, CMG, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Mike Walsh, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Malaysia, Mr. Christopher Carver, Political Counsellor representing the United States Ambassador to Malaysia, the Honourable Datuk Frankie Poon Ming Fung, Member of the State Assembly for N56 Tanjung Papat and Chairman of the Sabah Development Board. Yang berbahagia Datuk Andrew Sim, the Honorary Consul of Australia, Datin Dr. Cleopatra Asing, Deputy Permanent Secretary representing the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, Mr. Wilson Thomas, Deputy President representing the President of the Sandakan Municipal Council, Ms. Josephine Chai, Senior Marketing Manager representing the Chief Executive Officer of Sabah Tourism Board, Mr. Indra Purwandita H. Sunjoto, Deputy Chief Conservator of Forests, Planning and Management, representing the Chief Conservator of Forests, Sabah Forestry Department, Honourable Members of Parliament and State Assemblymen, Datuk-Datuk, Datin-Datin, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I also acknowledge the presence of the family members of those who were interned here in Sandakan during the Second World War, as well as the local Sabahans who selflessly sought to assist them. Terima kasih. Today, in solemn remembrance, we honor all those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and we stand with the families who have grieved for their loved ones who will never return home. Ladies and gentlemen, the catafalque party for today's service will be provided by the members of Rifle Company Butterworth attached to the 2nd 30th Training Group based in Butterworth, Malaysia. If you are able to, please stand for the mounting of the catafalque party. Please be seated. I would now like to invite to the lectern First Admiral Ivan Mario Andrew from the Royal Malaysian Navy, Sandakan, to present this morning's call to remembrance.
Today, we gather in solemn remembrance. 8 years have passed since the dark days of World War II. Yet the echoes of courage, sacrifice, and loss remain etched deeply in our hearts. On this Sandakan Memorial Day, we honor more than 2,400 Australian and British prisoners of war who perished at the Sandakan POW camp here, and along the harrowing Sandakan Ranau death marches, and the courageous Sabahans who risked and gave their lives to help them. Let us remember them with reverence and gratitude. Let us reflect on the enduring lessons of history. Let us stand united in our hope for a more peaceful world. Their stories must never be forgotten. Their courage must never fade from our memory. Their legacy lives on in our hearts and in our shared responsibility to uphold justice, compassion, and peace. May this day renew our commitment to peace, deepen our respect for freedom, and strengthen our resolve to remember those who suffered so greatly with dignity, with sorrow, and with hope. May their memory endure today and always.
Thank you, First Admiral Ivan Mario Andrew. Now, allow me to invite Mr. Wilson Thomas, Deputy President representing the President of the Sandakan Municipal Council, to deliver his welcome address.
Thank you to the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Jonathan. The Honorable Madame Vivian Wong Shei, Member of Parliament for P186 Sandakan, representing the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah, Her Excellency Miss Danielle Heineke, the Australian High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. A.J. Sharma, CMG, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Mike Walsh, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Malaysia, Mr. Christopher Carver, Political Counselor representing the United States Ambassador to Malaysia, the Honorable Dato Frankie Poon Ming Fung, Member of the State Assembly for N56 Tanjung Papat and Chairman of the Sabah Development Board, Yang Berbahagia Dato Andrew Sim, the Honorary Consul of Australia, Datin Dr. Cleopatra Asing, Deputy Permanent Secretary representing the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, Ms. Josephine Chai, Senior Marketing Manager representing the Chief Executive Officer of Sabah Tourism Board, Mr. Indra, Purwandita Sunjoto, Deputy Chief Conservator of Forests, representing the Chief Conservator of Forests, Sabah Forestry Department. Selamat pagi and welcome. Distinguished guests, excellencies, representative of the governments of Malaysia, Australia, and the United Kingdom, members of the diplomatic corporation, veterans and their families, members of the armed forces, school children, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to welcome you to the Sandakan Memorial Park on this 15 August 2025 for our annual Sandakan Memorial Day service. Today marks the 80th year since the final Sandakan death march and the end of the Second World War in this region. We gather on this very ground where between 1942 and 1945, nearly 2,700 Australian and British prisoners of war were held captive by the Japanese. More than 2,400 of them perished in the camp and on the brutal 260-kilometer marches to Ranau. Only 6 men, Gunner Owen Campbell, Bombardier Richard Braithwaite, Warrant Officer William Stipowit, Lance Bombardier William Moxham, Private Keith Botterill, and Private Nelson Short survived, thanks on the part of the extraordinary bravery of local Sabahan who hid and nursed them. Their story is our shared story, one of unimaginable suffering, but also of resilience, compassion, and unity. The Sandakan Memorial Park itself tells that story. The rusting excavator, generator, and boiler that remains nearby reminds us of the forced labor endured here. The black granite obelisk before us, whose motif of the waratah, English rose, and hibiscus symbolizes the intertwined fates of Australia, Britain, Great Britain, and Malaysia. Bear witness to our collective loss and our enduring friendship. These are powerful reminders for us, and especially for the young people among us today, that history is not abstract. It really happened here. Sandakan Memorial Day is not merely a date on a calendar. It is a promise. It is our pledge that every 15 August at 7 a.m. we will stand together, former enemies, allies, and neighbors, to remember and honor those who suffered and died. It is a promise that we will uphold the values learned from their sacrifices: courage, restraint, humility, resilience, and compassion. It is also a promise that we will teach these lessons to future generations ensuring that such tragedies will never recur. Today's program, like those before, will include reflections and prayers, the laying of wreath by representative of our three nations, the sounding of the last post, the recitation of the oath of remembrance, a minute's silence, and the raising of our national flags accompanied by their anthems. On this 80th anniversary, let us also acknowledge the enduring partnership between the Sandakan community and our international friends. We thank the Australian and the British governments for their unwavering commitment to honoring their fallen citizens. We pay tribute to the local communities who risked everything to shelter the prisoners of wars. And we recognize the ongoing effort of veterans, organizations, historians, and volunteers to ensure what the memory of Sandakan remains vivid and that this park remains a place of reflection and learning. Lest we forget. Through remembrance, we find healing. Through unity, we find strength. Through telling this story, we ensure that courage and compassion prevails over hatred and indifference. On behalf of the people of Sandakan, I welcome you all and invite you to participate fully in this morning's commemorative service. May this hour deepen our understanding, renew our commitment to peace, and strengthen the bonds of friendship among our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson Thomas. I now humbly invite His Excellency Mr. A.J. Sharma, CMG, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, to deliver his commemorative address.
Good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi, and an especially warm welcome to veterans and their families. It's a great honor to be here in Sandakan this morning as the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, to remember those who died in service of their country in this part of Borneo, and to honor their sacrifice. I'd also like to pay tribute to the people of this region, the Sabahans, who resisted and often helped at great risk and cost to themselves, the Allies. Standing here in this beautiful, peaceful setting, it's hard to imagine the horrors and the hardships which the 2,500 Allied military personnel endured in the camps, building the airstrip, and ultimately on the death marches, which only 6 survived. But I would urge you all to take a moment to imagine the heat, the march, the thirst, the hunger, the beatings, the deaths. This is the first time I'm here in Sandakan to remember our dead, but it's not the first time I've done so. I've laid wreaths in France, in Turkey, in the Middle East, a tragic reminder of the ubiquity of war, of the sacrifice across the world of generations of our people for our values and for our security. And it continues. Our military personnel and their families, every day and everywhere, put themselves on the line for us. We should never forget that. Time passes, countries change, events become more distant. 80 years have passed since the marches and the end of the war. So we all need to be vigilant that we don't forget what happened here in Sabah to Australian, British and other Allied troops. And so I'm very grateful to the Sandakan authorities here and the Sabah Tourism Board for helping ensure that this doesn't happen, and to all of you for coming. We owe it to the fallen to remember them with pride, humility, and gratitude, and we will remember them.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. A.J. Sharma. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have the honor to invite Her Excellency, Ms. Danielle Heineke, Australian High Commissioner to Malaysia, to deliver her commemorative address.
Families of the fallen. The Honourable Madam Vivian Wong, Member of Parliament for Sandakan. His Excellency Mr. A.J. Sharma, British High Commissioner to Malaysia. His Excellency Mr. Mike Walsh, New Zealand High Commissioner to Malaysia. Darton Dr. Cleopatra Asing, representing the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah. Mr. Wilson Thomas, President of the Sandakan Municipal Council. Ms. Josephine Chai, Chief Executive Officer of the Sabah Tourism Board. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's a great honour to be here today on behalf of the Australian Government and Australian people in the beautiful surrounds of Sandakan. On this day, 80 years ago, the world was full of optimism. The Emperor of Japan publicly agreed to the surrender conditions set by the Allies in the Potsdam Declaration. The brutality of war that had gripped the world and touched so many was nearing an end. Australian allied and local forces here in Malaysia and across the Pacific had prevailed. Rebuilding could soon begin, and mechanisms could soon be established to preserve the hard-fought peace. Almost 1 million Australians served our small nation in World War II, including my grandfather in Papua New Guinea. Australia contributed what we could to those that needed it most, including here in Sabah. One of those Australians, Private John Skinner, aged 31, came from a small town called Tenterfield in New South Wales. John enlisted at the same time as his younger brother Ted, both members of the Medical Corps, brothers in arms, adored by their family, respected by their community. Yet, whilst he died alone, similar experiences were shared by many. John was only one of 22,000 Australian prisoners of war held captive in what was known as Pacific Theatre. His brother Ted was another who also sacrificed his life for his mates. In all, at the end of the war, 1 in 3 Australian prisoners of war had died. While this death rate is tragic on any measure, sadly, here in Sandakan, the odds were worse. For here, in this land of remarkable beauty, tragically, less than 1 of every 400 prisoners would survive. Sandakan and its surrounds are home to the single greatest atrocity committed against Australia in World War II. For this reason, Sandakan holds a special place in our hearts, reflecting the importance of this memorial site and this memorial service to ensure it continues to be a beautiful and respectful place of commemoration for generations to come. To remind us all of the terrible impact of war and impress upon all the need to preserve peace. I'm proud to join you today to remember the tragedy that befell the Australian and British prisoners here, to honour the many who died, the few that survived, and the beautiful people of Malaysia, particularly here in Sabah, who risked everything to help them, and who also suffered greatly during the war. In places like Sandakan, I'm reminded of how great the reach of conflict was, how far away from home Australians served and died, and most of all, how Australia and Malaysia have a deep partnership, history and support and respect for each other. I'm pleased the memory of Sandakan lives on across many generations, reflected here by your attendance today. Thank you. It's no doubt a moving day for many of you who have family connections here. For Australia and all Australians, the phrase, "lest we forget," are not words. It's a promise. It's a promise to those who serve and the families that stand by them. As the great Australian poet Dame Mary Gilmore wrote, "They are not dead, not even broken. Only their dust has gone back to the earth. For they, the the essential they shall have rebirth, whenever a word of them is spoken. Thank you for coming here this morning to help commemorate those who sacrificed so much, so that we will never forget.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Daniel Heineke. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now have the privilege and honor to invite the Honorable Madam Vivian Wong She, Member of Parliament for P186 Sandakan, to deliver the address on behalf of the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah. Dipersilakan Yang Berhormat Madam Vivian.
First of all, allow me to convey the Right Honourable Chief Minister, Datuk Sri Panglima Haji Hajiji Haji Nor's warm regards to all of you. The Chief Minister of Sabah is unable to join us on this very morning, and he asked me to represent and to read his speech. Her Excellency Ms. Daniel Heineke, the Australian High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Ajay Sharma, CMG, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Mike Walsh, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Malaysia, Mr. Christopher Carver, Political Counselor representing the United States Ambassador to Malaysia, the Honourable Datuk Frankie Poon Ming Fong, Member of the State Assembly of N56 Tanjung Papat and Chairman of the Sabah Development Board, the Honourable Kelvin Chong Ket Kyun, Member of the State Legislative Assembly to N55 Ilupura Sandakan, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Andrew Sim, the Honorary Consul of Australia, Datin Dr. Cleopatra Asing, Deputy Permanent Secretary representing the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment Sabah, Mr. Wilson Thomas, Deputy President representing the President of Sandakan Municipal Council, Ms. Josephine Chai, Senior Marketing Manager representing the Chief Executive Officer of Sabah Tourism Board, Mr. Indra Purwandita H. Sunjoto, Deputy Chief Conservator of Forests, Planning and Management, representing the Chief Conservator of Forest Sabah Forestry Department. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we all gather here with deep humility to honor those who faced unimaginable sufferings and ultimately paid the price in one of our darkest shared histories. Our gathering this morning goes beyond mere remembrance. It's a tribute with purpose. Sandakan isn't just a site of tragedy. It's where the human spirit shone brightly amidst cruelty. It's a place where bonds were forged from adversity, where the noble actions of local Sabahans shone alongside the struggles of allied soldiers. Here and now, we reaffirm our dedication to peace, unity, and memory. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sandakan Death March and the horrors of the prisoner of war camps are etched into our history, not only because of atrocities, but also due to the moments of shared humanity, the quiet acts of kindness, the food discreetly shared by villagers, the silent prayers, and the persistent of hope of those who clung to the idea of freedom against all odds. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, a significant milestone reminding us of how many decades have gone by since the guns fell silent. And yet for many families, especially those who have journeyed here from Australia, the United Kingdom, and beyond, the memories of the loved ones in Sandakan remain vividly alive. To the families of the fallen, your presence here means everything. Your loved ones, whether soldiers or Sabahans who risked everything to save them, are not forgotten. We honor their strength, their sacrifice, and their profound humanity. In Sabah, you will always find a sanctuary to remember them. Sandakan is sacred ground for you too. Let us acknowledge the quiet heroes among us, the local Sabahans whose family also endured loss and violence. Many gave their lives to shelter or assist allied soldiers. Their bravery endures in the stories shared through generations and forms an indelible part of our shared history. Ladies and gentlemen, this day stands as a living bridge among our nations between Sabah, Australia, and Britain. Through remembrance, we build understanding, friendship, and trust. As the Chief Minister of Sabah, I assure you that this legacy will be preserved, ensuring it is honored and passed on to the future generations. I thank the Department of Veterans Affairs of Australia and the Australian and British High Commissions in Malaysia for your unwavering support. We stand united in our pledge to remember the sacrifices that forged our peace. Thank you to Sabah Tourism Board, the Sandakan Municipal Council, and the dedicated organizing committee for your steadfast efforts to uphold this important tradition. Your commitment ensures that Sandakan Day transcends mere history significance to become a living moment of shared memory and purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, let us take a moment to pause, not merely in silence, but in reflection. Let us think about the true cost of conflict and the invaluable treasures of peace. Today, let us always remember the courage and dignity of those who suffered and those who stood by their side. May we honor their legacy by continuously striving for peace, justice, and unity, lest we forget. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Madam Vivian, representing the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we shall have the poem recital. Allow me to introduce to the lectern Madam Lynette Silver, AM, MBE, an Australian writer and historian, to recite the first poem entitled The Silent Army.
Good morning, everyone. Before I read this poem, I'd like to remind you that it's also 80 years today since Sandakan's last prisoner of war, Private John Skinner, was beheaded not 300 metres from where we are now sitting. It's one of the reasons why we chose the 15th of August as Sandakan Day. The Silent Army. The vast army is nearly silent now. The old ones are slipping away to join the young ones patrolling the endless shadowlands of memories. The familiar strains of Auld Lang Syne play softly in the mind, while stories of the vast army are rich with growing urgency for later generations to learn of the disease of war and its cure, achieved by the pain and sacrifice of the youth of the vast army. Raw memories of Sandakan's sacrifice, so long buried in secrecy, weep for a history of the ages, to tell generations to come of the evil that was done here, of the strength that was found here, of the succour that was given here, of the hope that was born here. Each year, the tragic Sandakan story is told in services by family members new and old, who recall with love those on endless patrol in the shadowlands of their memories.
And now, I would like to invite Miss Stella Lagan, granddaughter of the late Ernesto Lagan, a police detective from Sandakan, executed by firing squad in Kuching on March 1944 and buried in the hero's grave in Kuching, to recite the second poem entitled Echoes of Sandakan.
Echoes of Sandakan. In quiet earth and silent skies, a sorrowed past before us lies. where jungle path once bore the pain, now peace and memory remain. They walk with hope through fear and flame, young souls unknown, yet not in vain. From distant lands they came to stand and fell upon this sacred land. Sabahan hearts stood by side, with strangers bound by faith and pride. In whispered leaves their courage stays, a light that guides through shadowed days. No cross, no stone can ever hold the depth of grief, the strength so bold. But still we gather year by year to speak their names, to shed a tear. Oh, hear, O world, this solemn call. They gave their lives, they gave their all. Let Sandakan not fade away, but live in us each dawn of day, lest we forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite to the lectern Miss Fung Mei Sin, great-granddaughter of the late Mr. Wun Tau Yin, victim of the May 27, 1945 massacre in Sandakan, to deliver the Malaysian reminiscence.
I am Fong Mei Sin, great-granddaughter of the late Mr. Wun Tau Yin, a victim of the Sandakan massacre executed on 27 May 1945. During my childhood days, my late grandmother, Wun Fon Yi, always told us the story of her father, who was killed by the Japanese army during World War II. Later on, I discovered more about my great-grandfather from a Chinese book titled Blood on Borneo and the Secrecy of Japanese Surrender. Mr. Wun was a senior teacher at St. Michael's Secondary School during 1930 to 1940, who was also taught geography. He was also skilled in wireless radio communication and good at sending and receiving Morse code. These two skills, considered top secret military knowledge, unfortunately placed him on the Japanese army blacklist, which led to his arrest and death. From June to August 1943, the Sandakan incident occurred, where locals assisted Australian prisoners of war to escape and provided radio parts to the prisoner of war camp. As a result, a group of people were arrested by the Japanese army, including my great-grandfather, because at that time he was also a part-time radio operator and was proficient in sending and receiving Morse code. However, my great-grandfather was released because they did not find any evidence to prove that he was related to the Sandakan incident. After that, to keep our family members safe, my great-grandfather decided to move the family to Mount 12, which was far away from town. According to my grandmother, she was 15 years old at that time. On the afternoon on 27 May 1945, she was sitting with her parents and her brother at home. Suddenly, they saw some Japanese soldier coming, led by a Chinese guy. They predicted that this was not a good thing, and her father suggests that everyone immediately go and hide in the forest behind, but her mother was ill at that time and could not work. They had no choice but to leave her behind in the house. When the Japanese soldier arrived, they shouted out her father's name and said they would kill the whole family if he did not come out. They had no choice but to let her father go out alone to deal with it. Her father was taken by the Japanese soldier, and her mother cried so hard. It was the last time they saw her father. When the Japanese army surrendered on 10 September 1945, peace finally came to Sandakan. My grandmother's family was informed by a Chinese cook who used to work at the Japanese headquarters at Pei Hua School that her father was killed on 27 May 1945 and buried at the Lai's family property opposite Pei Hua School. My grandmother and granduncle found the grave, but after digging the grave, his remains were missing and only his clothes and shoes were found inside the grave. They were later informed that not long ago, a party from the Australian War Graves Unit, under the direction of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, had exhumed the original grave and removed the remains to be reburied at another place, but they did not know where. In July 2011, my grandmother found out her father was reburied at the Sandakan Massacre Memorial Grounds, and his name was inscribed on the memorial stone, together with the 27 other martyrs who had also been killed on 27 May 1945. On 31st July 2011, she attended for the first time a wreath laying ceremony at the Sandakan Massacre Memorial, which was organized by the Sandakan Municipal Council and Sandakan Chinese Chamber of Commerce, 66 years after his death. The family was greatly relieved that they had finally located his final resting place. Today, we pause to remember the cause of conflict and the importance of peace. The sacrifice made in the past remind us of the value of freedom and the responsibility we all share to work toward a more peaceful future. Let us honor their memories by fostering understanding and compassion in our life.
Now, I humbly invite Miss Karen Cowie, whose family's connection leads her to remember Private Leonard Victor Schutt, who wrote many letters to Karen's family, including her mother, who was about 7 years old when Private Leonard deployed, to deliver the Australian reminiscence.
Selamat pagi. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. In paying our respects to the Australians, British and the local people of Sabah, the importance is also in sharing our stories of these loved ones before they became lost in the silence that was Sandakan. They all had a family, friends and a life before. They lived through our stories. I have the honour of sharing with you the story of my grandfather's friend and my mother's childhood hero, Leonard Victor Schutt. He was born on 5th of January 1919. He grew up in Yarraville, a suburb of Melbourne, one of 6 children to Lillian and Morris Schutt. In his teens, Len started work as a miller at Schutt and Barry Produce Company in West Footscray. He boarded with my grandparents as my grandfather worked at the same place and their home was quite close by. Len developed a very close relationship with my grandparents, my mother and aunt. He was treated and felt like a member of the family, participating in many family gatherings and picnics. His younger brother also participated in these. Len joined the AIF in July 1940 and was posted to the 10th Recovery Section, later the 22nd Infantry Brigade Group Ordnance Workshop. He embarked to Singapore and on to Malaya on the Queen Mary in February 1941. The close relationship with my grandparents remained, Len writing many letters to my grandfather as well as to my 8-year-old mother. On Len's first sighting of the Queen Mary, he described it as a floating palace and was very excited about heading overseas. "What a time we are going to have," he wrote. In his next letter, Len described the journey as terrible hot. Nothing much happened on the way. All we did was play cards and two-up. To my mother, he was so sweet, writing, "I didn't like being on the boat much and would rather have been at the beach with you and your sister having fun." Once in Malaya, Len tells my grandfather he is working hard all day and half the night at times. He wrote of being on guard duty at night, listening to his mates snoring, or in later months, imagining noises all night. He also enjoyed some sporting opportunities. He played in a soccer match against a local Malayan team. Len writes that the opposition were a better team than us. They beat us by 1 goal. We are playing a return match next Saturday. Len enjoyed boxing and wrote about his successes, even winning a cup of which he was very proud. He would enjoy a beer or a game of cards with his mates, sometimes losing his pay or winning it back. Len would tease my grandfather about the Footscray Collingwood VFL matches, Collingwood winning both that year. Len made a comment that he thought Collingwood would make the finals, but they didn't quite. Obviously, Len was a Magpie supporter. My grandfather supported Footscray. Len wrote separate letters to my 8-year-old mother telling her that he wished he could have been with the family on holiday, as he would have helped her make the sandcastles. He would tease her by asking, "Can you wash the dishes yet? When I come home, I'm going to make that many dirty dishes that I'll need a lot of help to get them clean." He even remembered to send her a special Christmas greeting. Len would include notes to my grandmother, such as wishing he could be sitting in her home and eating with the family. Len dearly wanted to come home, although he also wrote about his hope to see some action and get a change from the same routine. Len's last letter to my family was dated the 19th of January 1942. He'd heard about the Australians' battle with the Japanese at Gamas, not that place names were mentioned. He tells a funny story of having to move camp in torrential rain, with plenty of snakes moving as well. He writes of meeting some Allied troops, and he is glad that they are on our side, as they are big men. He reflected that it's been almost 12 months since I left Australia, and it seems like 12 years. I don't think it will be long now, referring to fighting with the Japanese. Less than a month later, Len was a prisoner of war. As part of B-Force, Len was sent to Sandakan in July 1942. We don't have details of his time there. I can only imagine that being such a friendly, good-humoured and sociable person, he would have been a positive presence amongst his mates. In Sandakan, the importance of your closest mates, supporting them, and in return, being supported by them, was beyond measure. I know that Len had at least 2 good mates with him. Being able to share our stories of these POWs like Len today, 80 years on, means their hard-fought courage and resilience under the most adverse of conditions will be forever honoured and remembered. To quote Sir Peter Cosgrove in a speech he gave, "Those magnificent, gallant men and women, whether in uniform or not, theirs was not the explosive and immediate courage of the battlefield. It was instead a slow burn courage, stoic, enduring, often unto death, a courage of daily sacrifice and determination not to give in, not to despair." Len was on the first death march. He walked all the way to Renau, suffering from ulcers and illness brought on by starvation. He died in Renau First Camp on 2nd of April 1945. Len was 26 years old. His remains now lie in Labuan War Cemetery in an unmarked grave alongside his compatriots. Len lives on in our stories and memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Karen Cowie. Now it is my honor to invite Warrant Officer Class 2, Celia Vander Merwa, Assistant Defence Advisor, British High Commission to Malaysia, to deliver the British reminiscence.
Good morning, everyone. It is my genuine privilege to have been asked to say a few words here today. The Sandakan Death March stands as one of the darkest and most tragic episodes of World War II in the Pacific. Taking place in Borneo between January and August 1945, it involved the forced movement of approximately 2,400 Australian and British prisoners of war by Japanese forces under brutal conditions. Initially imprisoned at the Sandakan POW camp, these soldiers were tasked with building a military airstrip for the Japanese. As the war turned against Japan and Allied forces drew nearer, the decision was made to move the prisoners inland to the town of Renau, a journey of over 260 kilometers through dense jungle, mountainous terrain, and disease-ridden swamps. The marches, conducted in several phases, were marked by starvation, a physical exhaustion, tropical illness, and extreme violence. POWs were denied food, medical care, and basic human dignity. Anyone who faltered was beaten, left behind, or executed. By the end of the death marches and the subsequent imprisonment at Renau, only 6 Australian soldiers survived, all of whom had escaped into the jungle and were later aided by local civilians and resistance fighters. There were no British survivors. The remaining prisoners died from starvation, illness, or execution. The Sandakan Death March is now recognised as the single worst atrocity suffered by Australian servicemen during the Second World War. Remembering the survivors and the victims of the Sandakan Death March is crucial, not only for honouring their sacrifice, but also for preserving historical truth. The 6 Australian escapees bore witness to the unimaginable brutality and played a vital role in exposing the atrocities after the war. These acts of remembrance are vital in educating future generations and reaffirming our collective commitment to peace, dignity, and human rights. Survivors of such horrors, along with the locals who risked their lives to help them, remind us of the resilience of the human spirit. Their stories deserve to be told, shared, and never forgotten, not just as historical record, but as enduring lessons on the costs of war and the value of compassion. As I stand here, I try to imagine what they had felt, the fear, the pain, the guilt of survival. Some of them, after the war, barely spoke of it. One survivor later said it was harder to live with the memories than to endure the march itself. What struck me most was not their endurance, but their quiet dignity. They did not seek glory. Their survival was a burden as much as a blessing, and yet because they lived, the truth was told. They bore witness not only for themselves, but for every fallen comrade who never made it out of Sandakan or off the track to Renau. The 6 survivors remind us that memory is not just looking back, it is carrying forward. Their voices became the voices of the voiceless. We will remember them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may lay your tributes on the flower stand with a single rose. Thank you. You may now return to your seats. To lay the first wreath, I invite the Honourable Madam Vivian Wong Shi, Member of Parliament of P186 Sandakan, representing the Right Honourable Chief Minister of Sabah. Next, I invite Her Excellency Miss Danielle Heineke, the Australian High Commissioner to Malaysia. invite His Excellency Mr. A.J. Sharma, CMG, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia. Now I invite His Excellency Mr. Mike Walsh, the New Zealand High Commissioner to Malaysia. Now I invite Mr. Christopher Carver, Political Counselor representing the United States Ambassador to Malaysia. Now I invite the Honorable Datuk Frankie Poon Ming Foong, Member of the State Assembly for N56 Tanjung Papat. Now I invite Datin Dr. Cleopatra Asing, Deputy Permanent Secretary, representing the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah. Now I invite Mr. Wilson Thomas, Deputy President, representing the President of the Sandakan Municipal Council. Next, I invite Ms. Josephine Chai, Senior Marketing Manager representing the Chief Executive Officer of Sabah Tourism Board. And lastly, I invite Mr. Indra Purwandita H. Sunjoto, Deputy Chief Conservator of Forests, representing the Chief Conservator of Forests, Sabah Forestry Department. With that, we conclude the official wreath laying ceremony. Thank you all very much. And thank you to Gary and Georgia for the moving performance and instrumental. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now have the Ode of Remembrance. If you are able to, please stand for the recitation of the Ode of Remembrance by Colonel Corey Shilabia, Defence Advisor, Australian High Commission, Kuala Lumpur. Please remain standing for the last post, 1 minute silence and the rouse.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, the final part of our service is the laying of private wreaths and floral tributes. For those who are not laying a wreath, I kindly ask you to remain in your seats. For the first private wreath, I invite the Honourable Madam Vivian Wong She Yi, Member of Parliament for P186 Sandakan. Next is from the Honourable Datuk George Hugh Voon Zin, Member of the State Assembly for N54 Karamunting. Next is from the Honourable Mr. Kelvin Chong, Member of the State Assembly for N55 Elopura. Next is by Colonel Corey Shilabia, Defence Advisor, Australian High Commission, Kuala Lumpur. Next is from Mr. Michael Bailey, on behalf of all those who lost a relative in war. Next is from Rod Bramage, on behalf of all veterans. Next is from Mr. Paul Shields, grandson of Private Ralph Shields. And now, for those who wish to pay your respects with a private wreath or tribute, please come forward at this moment. Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the service will conclude with the dismount of the catafalque party. Please stand. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Sandakan Day Memorial 2025. On behalf of the Sandakan Municipal Council and the Sabah Tourism Board, I express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone involved in making this service possible. Your contributions have made this memorial truly meaningful and respectful. I extend our thanks to the manager and staff of the Sandakan Memorial Park, the Department of Veterans Affairs Australia, members of the Australian and Malaysian Defence Forces, the Sabah Forestry Department, the Duchess of Kent Hospital, the Scouts and Girl Guides Associations and the Red Crescent Society, and all our readers for their participation in and support of this morning's service.